On June 13th, 2001, Jason Jolkowski, a 19-year-old college student from Omaha, Nebraska, vanished without a trace. Jason was described by family and friends as a quiet, kind, and responsible young man. At the time of his disappearance, he lived with his parents and younger brother. Jason had recently attended college at Iowa Western Community College and was considering transferring to a broadcast journalism program at Bellevue University. He worked at Fazoli's, a local Italian restaurant, and was highly regarded for his dependability and good work ethic. Importantly, Jason was not known to be involved in any high-risk behaviors like substance abuse. On the morning of June 13th, Jason was scheduled to work at Fazoli's. His car was in the shop for repairs, so his employer arranged for him to meet a co-worker at Benson High School, located 8 blocks from his home, where he would catch a ride to work. Jason left his home around 10:45 a.m., reportedly in good spirits, and began walking to the high school. Witnesses saw him carrying a red work shirt and black dress pants, the uniform required for his job. However, Jason never made it to the high school, which was confirmed by the security cameras there, which showed no signs of him. A neighbor reported seeing Jason taking out the trash earlier that morning and noted nothing unusual. What happened to him in the short 8-block stretch remains a mystery. When Jason failed to return home or show up at work, his family quickly grew concerned and contacted the Omaha Police Department. The investigation initially focused on the short route Jason would have taken to Benson High School. Despite extensive searches of the neighborhood, no physical evidence was ever found. No clothing, personal belongings, or signs of foul play. Jason's bank account and cell phone remained unused after his disappearance, and there were no verified sightings of him. Law enforcement also explored the possibility that Jason had run away, but this theory was dismissed based on his behavior and character. By all accounts, Jason was close to his family, excited about his future, and showed no signs of wanting to leave voluntarily. The lack of evidence in Jason's case has led to numerous theories about what might have happened to him. One theory is that Jason was abducted while walking to Benson High School. Given that he was a young person, some argue that he could have been targeted by an opportunistic predator. However, there's no physical evidence to support this theory, and witnesses didn't report any suspicious activity in the area. Further, Jason wasn't exactly an easy target for a predator. He was 6'1" with an athletic build, not the typical target for an opportunistic perp. Another possibility is that Jason suffered some kind of accident, such as being struck by a vehicle, and his body was hidden by the responsible party. This theory is also speculative, as there's no evidence of an accident or cover-up. Personally, I don't like this theory for 2 major reasons. First, an accident such as this would have occurred in an urban area during the late morning hours. I find it difficult to believe that there would have been no witnesses, or that the perpetrator would have time to clean up all evidence from the scene. Although unlikely, some have speculated that Jason chose to disappear. His family strongly rejects this idea, citing his happy demeanor, plans for the future, and close relationship with his loved ones. The most plausible explanation is that Jason encountered foul play, but the details remain unclear. Without witnesses or evidence, this theory is difficult to investigate further or even speculate on. However, all evidence suggests that Jason was kind and helpful, and unfortunately, it may be the case that someone took advantage of this to eliminate him. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to share this video with your friends and family. If you enjoy my content and want to help me out in a small but meaningful way, please click that share button and send this video to 2 people. Alain Kan, born on September 14, 1944 in Paris, France, was a French singer-songwriter whose career spanned from the early 1960s until his mysterious disappearance in 1990. Alain's musical journey began in 1963 when, at the age of 16, he released his first single, C'est l'amour. The following year, he produced 3 albums with Decca Records, featuring covers of popular American and Canadian artists. Despite these early efforts, mainstream success eluded him during this period. In the 1970s, Kan traveled to London, where he was profoundly influenced by the burgeoning glam rock scene, and particularly David Bowie. This inspiration led to a significant transformation in his musical style. He returned to France and started releasing glam rock-inspired tracks, a complete departure from his previous style. Throughout the late 1970s and 1980s, Alain continued to evolve artistically, releasing a variety of albums which had some success in the French market. Despite his contributions to the French music scene, Kan remained relatively underground, cultivating a dedicated but niche following. On April 14, 1990, at the age of 45, Alain Kan disappeared without a trace. He was last seen at the Rue de la Pompe metro station in Paris. Despite extensive investigations, no concrete information has surfaced regarding his fate, and he remains missing to this day. A number of theories have been raised about his disappearance. The most common theory is that he chose to end himself voluntarily. According to his sister, Alain may have been HIV positive, which was highly stigmatized at the time and viewed as a slow death sentence. Another theory suggests that he was sick of his life as an aging, fading star and simply wanted to get away from it all. There's some evidence to support this theory, with unconfirmed sightings of Alain being reported in Switzerland throughout the 90s. However, the sightings of him slowed to a trickle and then stopped by the early 2000s. Astrology, the belief that celestial bodies influence human affairs, has roots stretching back to ancient civilizations. The earliest known records of astrological practices date to Mesopotamia around the 3rd millennium BC, where the Sumerians observed planetary movements and linked them to terrestrial events. These observations were further developed by the Babylonians, who created the zodiac, a division of the sky into 12 equal parts, each associated with specific constellations. In ancient Egypt, astrology was intertwined with religion and governance. The Egyptians adopted the Babylonian zodiac and associated it with their deities, using celestial events to guide decisions and predict outcomes. Similarly, in ancient Greece, astrology merged with philosophical thought. Philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato considered the cosmos a harmonious entity, and this perspective influenced astrological interpretations. The Greeks also introduced the concept of horoscopic astrology, focusing on individual birth charts to predict personal destinies. A pivotal figure in the history of astrology is Claudius Ptolemy, a Greco-Roman scholar of the 2nd century AD. His work, the Tetrabiblos, systematically compiled astrological knowledge of his time and became a foundational text for subsequent generations. Ptolemy's approach sought to align astrology with the scientific understanding of his era, emphasizing the influence of celestial bodies on earthly events. During the Islamic Golden Age, astrology experienced significant development. Persian Islamic scholars translated and expanded upon Greek astrological texts, integrating them with their own astronomical observations. Astrology was considered a legitimate science, and its principles were applied in medicine, agriculture, and daily life. In medieval Europe, astrology was intertwined with various aspects of society, including medicine and politics. Astrological charts were used to diagnose illnesses and determine auspicious times for medical procedures. The Renaissance period saw a resurgence of interest in astrology, with mainstream scholars like Johannes Kepler, known for his laws of planetary motion, practicing astrology alongside astronomy. The 17th century marked a turning point for astrology's status as a science. The rise of the scientific method and empirical research led to skepticism about astrology's validity. Figures like Isaac Newton demonstrated that celestial bodies followed natural laws, diminishing the perceived mystical influence of stars and planets on human affairs. Despite its decline in scientific credibility, astrology has persisted into modern times, often categorized as a pseudoscience by skeptics. Numerous scientific studies have tested astrology's claims, often finding no empirical support. For instance, a double-blind study published in Nature in 1985 concluded that astrologers couldn't match natal charts to psychological profiles better than chance. Similarly, a meta-analysis of multiple studies found no evidence supporting astrology's predictive power. From a believer's perspective, astrology isn't just a casual hobby or form of entertainment. It's a deeply personal and mystical practice that helps individuals understand themselves and others. Those who believe in astrology view the positions of celestial bodies as holding real power over human personality traits, life paths, and even the timing of significant events. At the heart of modern astrology is the belief that the universe is interconnected, and that humans are influenced by the cosmic forces surrounding them. For believers, astrology is about much more than daily horoscopes. It's a tool for self-reflection, spiritual growth, and sometimes even guidance in decision-making. A core belief in astrology is that the planets and stars emit energies that interact with human beings. Believers often feel that these cosmic energies can affect moods, interactions, and personal growth. For instance, they see Mercury retrograde, a period when the planet appears to move backward in the sky, as a time prone to communication breakdowns, technology issues, and personal introspection. The idea that celestial bodies have specific energies resonates with many believers who feel these shifts palpably in their daily lives. The belief here isn't strictly scientific but experiential. Many astrologers and astrology followers claim they have felt, observed, and responded to these patterns over time. Furthermore, believers see birth charts as a cosmic blueprint that reveals an individual's strengths, weaknesses, and life purpose. The detailed nature of a natal chart, which maps planetary positions at the exact time and place of birth, offers insights that resonate on a psychological level. By interpreting their birth chart, they gain a sense of meaning and purpose that goes beyond the randomness of daily life. On January 24, 1984, 19-year-old Timothy Michael Molnar vanished under circumstances that continue to baffle investigators and his family. A dedicated student at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida, Tim was known for his punctuality and commitment to his family and education. That morning, he dropped off his 14-year-old brother, Frank, at school and was expected to attend his classes thereafter. However, instead of heading to the university, Tim returned home, loaded his bicycle into his 1969 Dodge Dart, and drove away, never to be seen alive again. When Tim didn't return home that evening, his parents immediately sensed something was amiss. He was known for adhering to his routines, and any deviation was unusual. Concerned, they contacted his friends and the local authorities, but no one had any information about his whereabouts. That night, the family received 2 unsettling phone calls with only silence on the other end, leading them to wonder if Tim was trying to reach out, but was unable to speak. Weeks later, a clue emerged when the Molnar family received a credit card bill indicating a purchase at a gas station in Lake City, Florida, made on the day of Tim's disappearance. The gas station attendant recalled Tim refueling alone, which intensified speculations about his intentions. Further investigation revealed that Tim had withdrawn nearly all his savings, leaving just $10 in his account. The fact that he left $10 in the account has been theorized by some to indicate that he intended to keep this account open and active. According to this theory, Tim may have been planning on returning to his regular life. Otherwise, he would have just withdrawn it all. 4 months after his disappearance, another lead surfaced. The family received a letter from a car repossession company in Atlanta, Georgia. The letter stated that Tim's Dodge Dart had been found abandoned in a parking lot just a block away from the Greyhound bus station, 6 days after he vanished. Inside the car, his driver's license, wallet, credit card, and other personal items were discovered, but his bicycle, stereo system, and an expensive toolkit were missing. Despite these developments, years passed without any significant breakthroughs. In 1996, over a decade after Tim's disappearance, a viewer named Stephen Cull was watching an episode of Unsolved Mysteries that featured Tim's case. Cull recognized the clothing shown in the episode as matching those found on a body he had discovered frozen in ice in a remote woodlot near Neosho, Wisconsin, 10 years earlier. He contacted the medical examiner, who still had a set of keys found with the deceased. When the Molnar family provided a copy of their house key, it matched one of the keys in evidence. DNA testing ultimately confirmed the remains were indeed Tim's, putting to rest any doubts. The discovery of Tim's body in Wisconsin, nearly 1,500 miles from his home, raised more questions than answers. The cause of death couldn't be determined due to the condition of the remains, but there were no signs of trauma. How and why Tim ended up in such a remote location remains a mystery. Friends and family found it particularly perplexing that he had left his cherished car behind, as he was known to be very proud of it. Tim's story is as tragic as it is baffling. At 19, he was right on the cusp of adulthood, a time when responsibilities grow heavier and new pressures can emerge. It's during this late adolescent or early adult period that mental health crises can strike, and at times, without much warning. Could Tim have experienced some type of psychological breakdown that prompted his sudden exit? The abrupt decision to abandon his routine, withdraw nearly all his savings, and leave his cherished car behind might point to a severe internal struggle. All evidence seems to suggest that he was a high-achieving student, and oftentimes the transition from high school to college can be a real mental shock. This could have been the catalyst for some sort of mental break which ultimately led to his demise. Yet foul play clearly can't be dismissed either in this case. Tim's unexpected journey all the way to Wisconsin, where his remains were eventually discovered, leaves a serious sense of foreboding. Did someone manipulate him into traveling so far from home? Could he have encountered danger after voluntarily leaving? There's simply not enough evidence to say. The missing bicycle and tools add a layer of suspicion, hinting that someone else might have been involved. While researching the case, I saw it mentioned on an old forum that he may have been hitchhiking after abandoning his vehicle. One theory is that he may have been picked up by the wrong person, who eliminated him. Another angle is the possibility of a secret life. Sometimes people, especially young adults feeling boxed in by expectations, contemplate escape. Perhaps Tim had aspirations or connections that he kept hidden, leading him to venture off on his own. Unfortunately, given that this occurred in the days before the mass adoption of computer technology and before the internet, we have no insight into any potential hidden motives. The fact he left $10 in his bank account suggests he might have intended to return to his regular life, indicating at least some thoughtfulness to his departure. Ultimately, we may never fully understand Tim's last days. His case is an enduring mystery, one that reflects how a single choice or a single tragedy can alter a life's course forever. The Hookman is one of the most enduring American urban legends, a cautionary tale often told to teenagers as a chilling reminder to remain vigilant in isolated, vulnerable situations. The story typically centers on a young couple who have driven to a secluded spot, often a lover's lane, where they hope to enjoy some time alone, if you catch my drift. As they're alone in this secluded area, they're threatened by a mysterious, hook-wielding figure lurking in the shadows. Although variations of the story exist, the central elements remain consistent: an escaped killer with a prosthetic hook for a hand, an unsuspecting pair of teens, and a near-fatal encounter. The earliest documented accounts of the hookman legend appeared in the mid-20th century in the United States, quickly spreading through oral tradition. By the 1960s, it had become a staple of American folklore, with many parents and authority figures repeating it as a moralistic warning to adolescents. Over time, the hookman legend spawned numerous variations, but each version retained a common motif. The potential perpetrator leaves a hook behind as eerie proof of a close call. In some tellings, the couple hears a scraping sound on the car's door, becomes frightened, and decides to leave quickly, only to discover a bloody hook caught on the handle at home. This signature element, an unmistakable menacing clue, stands at the center of what makes the hookman legend so memorable. Unlike some urban legends that can be traced back to specific local incidents or historical figures, there's no documented case of a real hookman terrorizing secluded lovers. This hasn't stopped the story's spread. If anything, the absence of a verifiable origin has only enhanced its mystery and appeal. The fact that the hookman legend persists, despite lacking any factual foundation as a true crime, underscores the power of narrative to influence behavior and opinion. Even in an era dominated by fact-checking and digital archives, people remain captivated by tales that tap into primordial fears of the unknown. Also, the fact remains that while the hookman himself definitely doesn't exist, numerous cases of lovers' lane slayings have occurred, such as in Atlanta in 1977. These real-life cases lend an air of reality to the hookman legend. Sharon Kinne's story isn't your typical true crime case. Her story involves a series of highly suspicious deaths, multiple trials, and an eventual prison escape that left authorities and the public wondering if she would ever be found. Sharon was born Sharon Elizabeth Hall in Independence, Missouri, on November 30th, 1939. She spent her childhood in the surrounding area and seemed to have a fairly typical upbringing. Accounts vary on how normal her life really was, but by her teens, she had developed a reputation for being very outgoing, so to speak. When she was just 16 years old, Sharon met James Kinne at a church function. James, commonly known as Jimmy, was a good-natured young man who quickly fell for Sharon's charms. They started dating, and in 1956, despite their youth, the couple got married. That same year, they welcomed a child. By most external appearances, the Kinne household was an ordinary mid-century family. However, beneath the surface, there were signs of tension. Some friends and neighbors suspected that the couple argued often, sometimes over finances, and sometimes over Sharon's alleged infidelities. On March 19, 1960, Jimmy Kinne was found shot in the head in the family home. Sharon claimed that their 2-year-old daughter had accidentally shot him with his own weapon while playing. At first glance, the scenario looked plausible. The weapon was in the house, and a toddler could have picked it up. Further, such tragedies do tend to happen when you give a literal toddler a high-powered weapon. However, the authorities found several details suspicious. For instance, the placement of the weapon and the wound did not conclusively support the claim of an accidental shooting by a small child. Part of the complication arose because of a life insurance policy. Shortly before Jimmy's death, Jimmy had taken out a policy that benefited Sharon, which raised eyebrows among investigators who wondered if Sharon had a financial motive. Notably, the policy paid out double in the case of accidental death. Rumors also spread that Sharon was seeing other men, which added yet another layer of suspicion. Despite these rumors, authorities did not gather enough evidence to charge her immediately, and James Kinney's death was initially ruled accidental. The community, however, was split on the matter, with some believing her story of a tragic accident, while others quietly gossiped that Sharon had done it. Later that year, another death would thrust Sharon into the public spotlight for a second time. Patricia Jones, the wife of a man named Walter Jones, was found shot to death on May 27, 1960, in a secluded area near Kansas City. Investigators learned that Walter, who was in the midst of marital troubles, had been romantically involved with Sharon. Accounts differ about whether Sharon and Walter were having a serious relationship or just a fling. According to some sources, they had been very serious and had been seeing each other over the long term. According to others, they had been seeing each other often in just the weeks leading up to Patricia's death. Sharon and Patricia were known to each other, and witnesses testified that Sharon told them that Patricia had confronted her in some capacity about the affair. Patricia was eventually found dead, lying in a lover's lane area, far from a random accident. Given Sharon's known connection to Walter, she quickly became the prime suspect. Investigators pieced together that Sharon had allegedly picked Patricia up to talk things over, perhaps to discuss the affair and to diffuse tension. After that meeting, Patricia never made it back home, and forensic evidence showed that she had been shot multiple times by one of the weapons Sharon owned. Given the buildup of evidence, Sharon was arrested by the authorities and charged with Patricia's slaying. Notably, Walter Jones wasn't charged in relation to the crime, and it doesn't appear that he was considered seriously as a suspect. With the arrest for Patricia's slaying, authorities decided to take a closer look at Jimmy's death. They believed Sharon's involvement in Patricia's slaying suggested a pattern of using steel to solve personal conflicts, so to speak. However, the circumstantial evidence linking Sharon to both crimes proved tricky in court. Prosecutors found themselves juggling two separate cases with overlapping pieces of evidence and a lot of public scrutiny. The press had begun referring to Sharon as a femme fatale who lured men to their doom. While this made for a sensationalistic story that moved newspapers, it didn't help the prosecution in delivering clean, fact-based cases. Sharon's trial for the elimination of Patricia Jones came first in June 1961. The prosecution laid out a motive. Patricia was a rival in love, and Sharon wanted to remove her so she could have Walter Jones to herself. However, the jury ended up deadlocked, resulting in a mistrial. A second trial began in January 1962, and this time Sharon was convicted of Patricia's slaying. She was sentenced to life in prison for this offense. Yet she didn't remain behind bars for long, as that conviction was soon overturned by the Missouri Supreme Court due to legal errors during the trial. This meant Sharon would have to be tried yet again for Patricia's slaying. Before her third trial for Patricia's elimination could take place, she went to trial for Jimmy Kinney's death. That trial also ended in a hung jury. Eventually, the charges related to Jimmy's death were dropped, and Sharon was released on bond while awaiting the new trial for Patricia's slaying. In the midst of legal chaos, she was granted the freedom to move about as she awaited the retrial, a decision that would prove to be crucial to her future. In September 1964, Sharon decided to travel to Mexico with another man, allegedly for a vacation. While there, on September 18, 1964, a truly unexpected event happened. Yet another shooting occurred. This time, a Mexican-born American named Francisco Ordonez was shot to death in a motel. According to Sharon, Ordonez had tried to assault her, and she shot him in self-defense. She emphasized that she didn't mean to hit him square in the chest, and that she only meant to frighten him. Curiously, when a motel employee heard the sounds and ran to see what was going on, Sharon started blasting yet again, striking the employee in the shoulder. Mexican authorities were skeptical, and they took her into custody almost immediately. They believed that she attempted to rob Ordonez, and when he resisted, she ruthlessly eliminated him. Authorities further theorized that she had intended to slay the motel employee so as to close any loose ends on witnesses. This new shooting led to a trial in Mexico, where Sharon was convicted of slaying Ordonez. She was sentenced to a prison term in Mexico City and famously earned the nickname La Pistolera, a name that evoked a Wild West outlaw persona. On December 7, 1969, Sharon managed to escape from Ixtapalapa Women's Prison under circumstances that remain somewhat of a mystery. Some stories suggest she simply walked out during a power outage, while others claim she bribed guards or exploited poor security systems. Either way, once she left the prison, she vanished without a trace. Despite searches by the Mexican authorities, she was never found. Meanwhile, the United States also had an interest in rearresting her because of the pending retrial in Missouri for Patricia's slaying. Once Sharon disappeared, the FBI got involved briefly, but any leads that surfaced proved to be dead ends. Over the years, there have been rumors that she snuck back into the United States under a new identity, or that she relocated to some remote part of South America. Some speculated she might have died under unknown circumstances not long after her escape, given the difficulty of surviving off the grid as a wanted fugitive. None of these theories have been substantiated, and Sharon Kinne has remained officially at large for decades. Sharon Kinne's case is a masterclass in how charm, luck, and systemic failures can allow someone to evade justice. The fact that she escaped justice multiple times, whether through hung juries, overturned convictions, or a literal prison break, reflects how her cunning outpaced two legal systems. If Sharon Kinne survived her 1969 escape, it's highly likely she continued her pattern of extreme violence. Her history shows a clear pattern, turning to violence whenever confronted with personal conflicts. From the deaths of Jimmy Kinne and Patricia Jones to Francisco Ordonez to the attempt on the life of the motel employee, Sharon consistently attempted to blast her way through problems. If she escaped to a new life, it's reasonable to assume she faced further challenges, and given her history, she likely resorted to the same deadly methods she used in the past. Sharon Kinne's method of slaying sets her apart from most female perpetrators, who typically rely on less direct means like poisoning. This is one factor that's led to so much fascination with her case over the years. Her willingness to shoot her victims at close range suggests a brazen and heartless approach to her craft, generally only seen amongst men. This break from the stereotypical subtle perpetrator female archetype makes her case particularly fascinating. Okay, so as I was finishing up editing on this section of the video, I decided to fact-check something, and I discovered a much-needed update. On January 17, 2025, the FBI announced that a woman named Deidre Glebus, who lived in Alberta, Canada, and died in 2022, matched the fingerprints of Sharon. There's no other information out there about this at this time, but I suspect I'll have an update on her life on the run very soon. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy my consistent content output and want to keep supporting my work, please take a moment to share this video with 2 of your friends or family members. The sweating sickness was a mysterious and deadly condition that struck England and later parts of Europe during the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance period. It first appeared in 1485 and recurred in several outbreaks until it vanished in 1551. The first outbreak coincided with the end of the Wars of the Roses and the rise of Henry VII to the English throne. The disease caused widespread panic, as it quickly claimed thousands of lives, including figures such as 2 Lord Mayors of London, and several members of the English nobility. Henry VIII was deeply fearful of the disease, and it influenced his policies and movements throughout his reign. His elder brother Arthur, Prince of Wales, is suspected to have died from the illness in 1502, which dramatically altered the line of succession in English history. Also, as a quick aside, the Tudors, being of Welsh origin, chose the name Arthur as the heir apparent to the English throne. This is thought to have been an attempt to enhance a Welsh claim over the English throne. Also, it raises the question as to what regnal number would have been used for a 16th century King Arthur. Would he have been King Arthur I or King Arthur II? The disease was marked by sudden and severe symptoms, starting with a sense of dread, followed by cold shivers, intense sweating, headache, severe body pains, and exhaustion. The initial trembling and high fever were followed by profuse sweating and a rapid decline into extreme fatigue and thirst. Unlike the bubonic plague, the sweating sickness did not cause visible sores or rashes, which added to its mysterious nature. Treatments of the time, based on the humoral theory of medicine, involved wrapping patients in heavy blankets to induce sweating and avoiding certain foods and mists thought to be harmful. If a patient survived the first 24 hours, they had a good chance of recovery, but many succumbed within that critical period. Despite its terrifying grip on Tudor England, the sweating sickness remains less well known than other historical epidemics like the Black Death. Its sudden disappearance after 1551 only adds to the mystery. The disease's swift vanishing act left a legacy of fear and speculation, influencing literature and popular culture long after it had gone. For instance, Shakespeare's play Henry IV Part II mentions a character dying of a sweat, potentially reflecting the lingering memory of the disease in the public consciousness. Over the centuries, numerous theories have been proposed regarding the cause of the sweating sickness. Some historians and scientists speculate that it could have been a form of hantavirus, which also presents with rapid onset fever and respiratory distress. These viruses are primarily found in rodents, and humans can contract the disease through direct contact with a variety of rodent-related sources, including their droppings. Others have proposed that the outbreaks could have been caused by anthrax poisoning. In favor of this theory, it is speculated that spores from this bacterium might have contaminated raw wool or animal carcasses, infecting people who came into contact with these materials. Another theory points towards enteroviruses. Enteroviruses are a group of viruses that typically enter the body through the gastrointestinal tract and can cause a range of diseases. They're known for their ability to cause sudden epidemics with high fever and systemic symptoms, aligning with historical accounts of the sweating sickness. Some researchers suggest that an unknown or extinct strain of enterovirus might have been responsible for the outbreaks, given the rapid onset and resolution of the disease. On the evening of October 25, 1963, 16-year-old Raymond Cary Jr. left his family's home on Daniel Boulevard in Bloomfield, Connecticut, around 7:15 p.m. According to sources, he was initially planning to see a movie that night. Instead, for reasons unknown, he changed his plans and visited a local bowling alley before attending a Pi Kappa Sigma sorority dance at the Lithuanian Dance Hall. At the dance, Raymond mentioned to another attendee that he had secured a ride home. A witness later observed him leaving the venue with 3 other teenage boys. Notably, sources aren't clear just how old these teenage boys were. It's not clear whether they were college students or fellow high school students, and trust me, this will play a role going forward when we discuss theories of the case. Tragically, Raymond never returned home that night and has not been seen or heard from since. His parents reported him missing the following morning. At the time of his disappearance, Raymond was a junior at Bloomfield High School, residing with his parents and sister. He was an active member of his community, participating in basketball and softball teams at Bethel Baptist Church. Described as a responsible teenager with no history of running away, his sudden disappearance was both alarming and out of character. Despite extensive investigations by local authorities and ongoing efforts to locate him, Raymond's case remains unsolved. A number of theories are floating around about this case. One prevalent theory suggests that Raymond might have been the victim of a hazing ritual gone horribly wrong. Given that he was last seen leaving the Pi Kappa Sigma sorority dance with 3 other teenage boys, some speculate that these boys could have been members or associates of a fraternity. Under this theory, it's thought that the group may be conducting an initiation ceremony. It's posited that Raymond, though not necessarily a pledge, might have been coerced or invited to participate in activities that led to an unintended fatal outcome. The absence of concrete evidence and the unidentified status of these boys lends some weight to this theory. Another theory considers the possibility that Raymond left the dance with individuals intending on harming him. The 1960s were perceived as a more trusting era, and it's plausible that Raymond accepted a ride from completely unfamiliar people. This scenario raises concerns about foul play, suggesting that he might have fallen victim to individuals with malicious intent. The lack of witnesses or leads supporting this theory makes it speculative, yet it remains within the realm of possibility. However, circumstantially it makes sense, because of course the 3 boys he left with never came forward. A less discussed but conceivable theory is that Raymond chose to disappear voluntarily. Factors such as personal issues, academic pressures, or social challenges might have influenced such a decision. However, those who knew him described Raymond as a responsible teenager with no history of running away, making this theory less convincing. Additionally, leaving behind his family, friends, and activities he was passionate about, like sports and music, would have been uncharacteristic. Personally, I think the most likely scenario is that the 3 boys he left with intended to do him harm. Given that they were teenagers at the time of the incident, it's possible that all 3 of these individuals are still alive. The Sheep Squatch, also known as the White Thing of West Virginia, is a cryptid said to haunt the Appalachian wilderness. Described as a large, woolly, and horned beast, this creature blends the traits of a sheep and a predator, making it one of the more bizarre cryptids in American folklore. Sheep Squatch sightings began gaining attention in the 1990s, though the region has long been a hotbed for folklore and stories of strange creatures. The cryptid's name derives from its peculiar appearance. Witnesses describe it as a large bipedal creature covered in shaggy white fur. It reportedly has a sheep-like face with ram-like horns, clawed hands, and sharp teeth. Its height is said to range between 6 and 9 feet, and it is often described as reeking of sulfur, a detail that has led some to associate it with paranormal or demonic activity. Early reports place Sheep Squatch sightings in Boone, Kanawha, Putnam, and Nicholas counties in West Virginia. One of the first documented encounters occurred in 1994 when a group of campers claimed they were terrorized by a large white beast that emerged from the woods. The creature reportedly growled at them and destroyed camping equipment before disappearing back into the forest. Since the 1990s, multiple Sheep Squatch sightings have been reported, each adding new details to the cryptid's lore. In one account from 1995, a motorist driving through Boone County spotted a massive woolly creature drinking from a creek. As the driver approached, the creature stood on 2 legs and fled into the woods, leaving claw marks on the ground. Another notable sighting occurred in 1999, when a group of teenagers hiking in the forest reported being chased by Sheep Squatch. They described it as running on all 4s and emitting a terrifying scream. In another notable incident from 2015, residents near the Coal River reported hearing strange noises at night and discovering large clawed tracks near their homes. One witness claimed to see a creature matching Sheep Squatch's description lurking in the woods, though it vanished before they could photograph it. I note that while there's reports that claw marks were discovered, suspiciously there are no photographs of these markings available online. As with most cryptids, there are a variety of theories regarding the origins of Sheep Squatch. Skeptics often suggest that sightings are the result of misidentified wildlife. For example, a bear with mange or a large mountain goat could easily be mistaken for a strange, woolly creature in low light or from a distance. The region's dense forests and rugged terrain can also make it difficult to accurately gauge the size or shape of an animal. Others propose that Sheep Squatch is rooted in local folklore, with stories evolving over time to include more fantastical elements. The sulfuric odor often associated with Sheep Squatch has led to speculation that the creature is linked to paranormal phenomena, possibly as a demonic entity or a ghostly manifestation. Another theory ties Sheep Squatch to the Mothman, another famous West Virginia cryptid. Both creatures are said to be harbingers of disaster or omens of bad luck, leading some to suggest they are part of the same phenomenon, but interpreted differently by witnesses. Still others claim that the creature may be an interdimensional anomalous being that slips into our reality to terrorize teenagers walking through the woods. From a scientific standpoint, the existence of Sheep Squatch is highly unlikely. No biological evidence, such as hair samples, bones, or credible photographs, has been found to support the creature's existence. Furthermore, a largely bipedal creature with a sheep-like face and ram's horns defies evolutionary logic. Predators like the Sheep Squatch would have forward-facing eyes to detect prey. Sheep Squatch has side-facing eyes to detect predators like prey animals do, despite being a predator animal itself. Further, predators generally have sleek fur for the purposes of agility and camouflage, rather than heavy coats which are designed for long grazing sessions. Such a combination of traits would require a highly implausible set of mutations and adaptations that are just downright contradictory. Also, I never thought I would be sitting here analyzing the evolutionary biology of the Sheep Squatch, but hey, here we are. On June 30th, 1991, the quiet town of Galesburg, Illinois, was shaken by the tragic death of 23-year-old Dany Williams. Dany, the youngest son of Larry and Lois Williams, managed distribution for the family's successful apparel manufacturing company. Having recently purchased his first home at 950 Florence Street, Dany seemed to be embarking on a promising future. Concern arose when Dany's parents hadn't heard from him for nearly 2 days. On the evening of June 30th, they decided to check on him. Larry Williams entered the house and discovered Dany seated upright on the couch, a weapon resting in his lap, and a wound to his forehead. Larry immediately contacted the Galesburg Police Department. The initial investigation led police to consider the possibility that he ended himself. Police Chief John Schlaff noted that the position of Dany's body, the nature of the wound, and the absence of overt signs of foul play suggested a self-inflicted situation. Within a month, the case was officially classified as such. However, the Williams family harbored doubts about this conclusion. Larry Williams, familiar with weaponry, questioned the likelihood of Dany shooting in such a manner that the weapon would land neatly in his lap. Seeking clarity, the family hired private investigator Mike Turnquist. Turnquist uncovered a statement from neighbor Darlene Sayers, who claimed to have seen Dany on the morning of June 29th, several hours after the estimated time of death. She described witnessing Dany leave his house with a dark-haired woman in a blue car. Despite this account, police believed Sayers might have confused the days, as Dany's mother had picked him up on June 28th. Further complicating the timeline, other witnesses reported activity at Dany's residence on June 30th, including sightings of a young man with curly brown hair. Chief Schlaff suggested these witnesses might have been mistaken about the dates. Dissatisfied with the investigation's direction, Larry Williams enlisted forensic scientist Mark Bowes. Using a laser luminescence scanner, Bowes detected blood traces in areas inconsistent with a self-inflicted shot, including on the television set. Blood analysis revealed two distinct types, Dany's type B and an unidentified type O. This suggested the presence of another individual at the scene. However, the Illinois State Crime Lab contested these findings, attributing discrepancies to potential contamination during the crime scene cleanup. Additional evidence raised more questions. A second shell casing, matching Dany's weapon, was found inside the couch, implying a second shot had been fired. Bose also noted that the bullet's trajectory was inconsistent with Dany's position, arguing that a self-inflicted shot would have caused him to fall forward, not remain seated upright. Despite these anomalies, Chief Schlaff maintained that the evidence supported a self-deletion ruling. In August 1991, a coroner's jury delivered an uncertain verdict regarding Dany's manner of death, unable to conclusively determine how it occurred. One thing I couldn't find in my research is whether anyone tested Dany's hands for residue. Personally, I think that this piece of information may hold the key to whether Dany actually ended himself or whether he met with his fate at someone else's hand. That said, given that there was another set of blood found at the scene, I don't think this is simply a case of a family that can't accept a sad reality. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to share this video with your friends and family. If you're enjoying my content, click the share button and send this video to 2 people who you think will like it. It's fascinating to imagine that a tiny difference in one moment can set off a series of events leading to a massively different outcome. This very idea sits at the heart of the butterfly effect. The term evokes an image of a butterfly gently flapping its wings and, in so doing, subtly shaping the weather on the other side of the world. While this image might sound poetic, it's rooted in a serious scientific concept. Small changes in initial conditions can have far-reaching and often unpredictable consequences. It's impossible to talk about the butterfly effect without first exploring chaos theory. Although the phrase chaos theory might bring to mind disorder and confusion, it's really the study of systems that appear to behave randomly, but actually follow strict deterministic rules. Mathematicians have long wrestled with the notion that certain formulas can produce incredibly complex patterns. One of the earliest mathematicians to notice how sensitive certain systems can be to initial conditions was Henri Poincaré in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This began while he was examining the three-body problem, an attempt to predict the motions of celestial bodies under mutual gravitational influence. Poincaré found that tiny changes in the starting parameters could produce wildly varying outcomes. Although he didn't call it the butterfly effect, Poincaré's observations foreshadowed the core idea. Small shifts can yield big consequences. Chaos theory, at least in its more formal sense, started taking shape decades later. Researchers noticed that certain systems that should have been predictable, like weather or population growth, were actually extremely sensitive to initial conditions. They found that a tiny rounding error at the start of a calculation could become magnified to an astonishing degree after multiple iterations. If there's one name most often associated with the butterfly effect, it's Edward Lorenz. In 1961, Lorenz, a meteorologist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, was running computer simulations to model weather patterns. He used a simplified set of equations that tried to mimic how temperature, pressure, and other factors interact to create changes in the atmosphere. One day, he decided to shortcut the process by inputting a few decimal points from a previous simulation, rather than starting from scratch. To his surprise, the new simulation gave a result entirely different from the earlier one. It wasn't just slightly off, it was completely unrecognizable. Upon closer inspection, Lorenz noticed that the numbers he had entered were rounded. For instance, instead of typing 0.506127, he typed 0.506, assuming the difference was negligible. This tiny discrepancy became magnified with each step in the simulation. Lorenz's discovery led him to ask whether something as small as a butterfly flapping its wings might influence weather patterns. This was a catchy way to illustrate how an infinitesimal change in one place could lead to a huge effect somewhere else. In 1972, Lorenz gave a talk titled Predictability. Does the flap of a butterfly's wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? That talk popularized the term butterfly effect and forever linked the notion of chaotic behavior with the flutter of their wings. The butterfly effect is part of chaos theory, but it has some distinct principles worth highlighting. First and foremost is sensitive dependence on initial conditions. This idea says that if you know the exact starting values of a system, you can theoretically predict what happens next, because the system is deterministic. However, in practice, it's nearly impossible to measure the initial conditions with infinite precision. Even if we're only off by a tiny fraction, that error will expand rapidly in many chaotic systems. Another key principle is nonlinearity. In a linear system, changes are typically proportional. Double the input, and you double the output. But in nonlinear systems, outputs can be disproportionately large or small relative to their inputs. This makes them notoriously difficult to model or predict. Finally, there's the matter of long-term unpredictability. Short-term forecasting of chaotic systems might be possible, but as you extend your predictions further into the future, errors multiply until the predictions become meaningless. This challenge has very real consequences for meteorology, economics, ecology, and countless other fields. The butterfly effect isn't just about the weather or consequences of a time traveler stepping on a prehistoric insect. After Lorenz's insights, scientists and mathematicians began looking for chaotic behavior in many other domains. Economics, for instance, often deals with complex interactions. Consumer behavior, international trade policies, technological changes, and more. Tiny shifts in investor sentiment or government policy can cascade into massive stock market swings, a phenomenon some analysts describe as having a butterfly effect in finance. Ecologists also find the concept useful. Species populations can explode or crash based on subtle changes in birth rates, death rates, or migration patterns. A small uptick in the temperature of a particular region could push certain species to move or adapt, which can affect predators, prey, and the entire food web. Even psychology has toyed with the idea in social dynamics. The smallest interaction, a casual word or a minor decision, could set someone on a trajectory that significantly changes their life over time. Before Lorenz's work, most believed that the more equations we had and the more powerful our computers got, the more precisely we'd be able to forecast events like weather or the market. Lorenz showed that even if you had almost perfect measurements, slight inaccuracies in those measurements would eventually throw off your entire forecast. This revelation had profound implications. It didn't just apply to weather. It suggested that absolute precision in long-term predictions might never be achievable for many real-world systems. Rather than being a matter of needing more data or better equations, the unpredictability seemed baked into the very nature of the system. At first, this was disheartening. If even a small rounding error rendered predictions useless, how could we ever trust our forecasts? But scientists soon realized that short-term predictions often remain valid. You might not know what the weather will be like 2 weeks from now, but you can still be reasonably accurate about tomorrow, or even the next several days. The key is understanding that predictability in chaotic systems has limits, and once you pass those limits, all bets are off. Forecasting population growth for the next year or two may be highly accurate, while forecasting it for the next 25 or 50 years will give increasingly limited confidence in results. Beyond pure science, the butterfly effect sparks philosophical questions about determinism, free will, and personal responsibility. And personally, I think this is why the butterfly effect is widely known in popular culture. It really says something profound about who we are as individuals and why we make the decisions we do. If the future is so sensitive to small changes, does that mean everything's predetermined? Or does it mean that the world is essentially unpredictable? It's a paradoxical blend of determinism and unpredictability. Some interpret the butterfly effect to mean that every action matters, no matter how insignificant it might seem at the time. While this might be an oversimplification, it does suggest that our choices, even the trivial ones, can echo further than we think. On May 5th, 1997, Monica Rizzo left her job at the San Antonio Department of Human Resources without explanation, leaving her purse behind. And before we get into this case, the way I see the mystery here is not who did it, but why that person isn't locked up forever. Concerned colleagues attempted to reach her over the following days. After several days of unanswered calls, her supervisor finally contacted her at home. Monica explained she wasn't feeling well and would return to work on May 19th. However, she never did. On June 5th, 1997, an anonymous male caller informed the San Antonio Police Department that Monica had been slain by her husband, Leonard. He also advised that her bones were buried in their backyard. Officers promptly visited the Rizzo residence, where Leonard claimed he had last seen Monica on May 5th when she returned from work. He stated that a few days later, he awoke to find her gone but didn't report her missing, believing she would return. A search of the backyard revealed only animal bones, providing no immediate evidence to support the caller's claims. Exactly 1 month later, on July 5th, the same anonymous caller contacted the police again, this time specifying that Monica's remains were under a pile of tires in the backyard. This led to a more thorough investigation, during which authorities discovered human bones, hair, and other evidence in the backyard and barbecue pit. A team of forensic archaeologists from the University of Texas conducted an extensive excavation, uncovering over 200 bone fragments, each less than 3 inches long. The condition of the bones suggested they had been processed through a wood chipper or shredder. Given the circumstances, Leonard became the prime suspect. However, he consistently denied any involvement in Monica's disappearance or death, expressing bewilderment at the presence of human remains on his property. Inside the home, investigators found sections of drywall that had been bashed in, which Leonard attributed to his emotional distress over Monica's disappearance. Co-workers reported that Monica had been losing weight and appeared with bruises in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, raising serious concerns about possible abuse. Despite these factors, there was insufficient evidence to charge Leonard or anyone else with the crime. In 1999, Leonard was arrested for an incident involving his then-girlfriend, who reported that he had threatened to, quote, chop her up, put her in a garbage bag, and bury her. When police arrived at his home, a standoff ensued, ending with Leonard being shot by officers after he pointed a weapon at them. He survived and was later convicted on 4 criminal counts related to the incident. Despite these events, no charges were filed against him concerning Monica's death. As of 2025, the case remains open, with no new information leading to an arrest. So yeah, I think we all know who committed this horrific crime, and I really have to question how he's still a free man. I feel like the only thing that will quote-unquote solve this one is increased awareness of Monica Rizzo's case and the public pressure that could come from that. The urban legend of the clown statue is a chilling tale that's been circulating online and in casual conversation since at least the early 2000s. At its core, this legend tells the story of a babysitter who grows increasingly uneasy about a strange statue in the home where she's been hired to watch children. When she contacts the parents to ask for permission to cover up or move the disturbing figure, they respond with confusion and alarm. They reveal that they don't own a clown statue and urge her to leave the house immediately. According to the legend, it's then discovered that what was presumed to be a statue was actually a person, sometimes an escaped criminal, disguised as a clown. The legend generally leaves it up to the imagination what the clown intended to do in the home. This urban legend has never been substantiated by reliable sources or confirmed through reputable news outlets. Fact-checking websites such as Snopes have categorized it among many babysitter-related horror tales that highlight the vulnerability of those tasked with caring for children in unfamiliar homes. Unlike documented criminal cases or verifiable reports, the clown statue lacks any credible evidence of its occurrence. Despite its fictional status, it continues to spread, partly because it taps into common human fears: fear of intruders, fear of clowns, and fear of being alone in a strange place. There's no single known origin point for this tale. Instead, it likely emerged as a variation on older babysitter horror stories, such as the famous urban legend, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which dates back to the 1960s. Over time, as the internet became more accessible and storytelling forms flourished, the clown motif was added, reflecting the broader cultural discomfort many people have with clowns. By incorporating a clown into a classic home intruder narrative, the legend leverages a modern fear, making it even more memorable and shareable. One reason this particular legend endures is the ease with which it can be adapted to modern settings. It can take place in any suburban home, any small town, or any city. Unlike other urban legends tied to specific times or locations, the clown statue thrives on its plausibility in the everyday world. The story could just as easily be set in a big coastal metropolis as it could be in the rural Midwest. As long as people continue to hire babysitters and clowns remain associated with unease rather than entertainment, the story will retain its power. Wojtek, a Syrian brown bear, became an unlikely yet celebrated member of the Polish Second Corps during World War II. His journey from an orphaned cub in Iran to a war hero is a testament to the extraordinary bonds formed in the most unexpected circumstances. In April 1942, Polish soldiers stationed in Iran encountered a young shepherd boy near Hamadan who had found a bear cub. The cub's mother had likely been slain by hunters. Moved by the cub's plight, the soldiers traded for him, offering items like canned beef and chocolate. They named him Wojtek, a traditional Polish name that translates to happy warrior. Wojtek quickly became an integral part of the unit, learning to respond to Polish commands rather than his native Arabic. Initially fed condensed milk from an empty vodka bottle, he later developed tastes for fruits, honey, and marmalade. Interestingly, he also acquired a liking for beer, which he often shared with his comrades. Reportedly, Wojtek would even indulge in smoking and enjoyed wrestling with the soldiers, showcasing his playful nature. As the unit prepared to move from the Middle East to Italy to join the British Eighth Army, they faced a logistical challenge. British transport regulations prohibited animals on troop ships. To circumvent this, Wojtek was officially enlisted as a private in the Polish army, complete with a service number and paybook. This enlistment allowed him to accompany his unit legally, since he was officially a soldier on par with his human comrades. During the grueling Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944, Wojtek's strength proved invaluable. He reportedly carried heavy crates of artillery shells, each weighing approximately 100 pounds, to aid in the resupply efforts. Witnesses noted that he never dropped a single crate, mirroring the actions of his fellow soldiers. In recognition of his contributions, the 22nd Artillery Supply Company adopted an emblem depicting a bear carrying an artillery shell. And personally, I think you may want to take a look at your screen right now if you're just listening, because damn, this emblem is aesthetic. After the war, the Polish Second Corps was demobilized, and Wojtek, along with his comrades, found temporary residence in Berwickshire, Scotland. He became a local celebrity, often visited by journalists and former soldiers. In 1947, Wojtek was transferred to Edinburgh Zoo, where he lived until his death in 1963. Former Polish soldiers would visit, bringing him gifts of food, tobacco, and beer, the bare necessities for Wojtek. While Wojtek's tale is heartwarming, it's natural to question the veracity of such an extraordinary story. Some historians have questioned whether the story was concocted as feel-good wartime propaganda. However, multiple credible sources corroborate the key events of his life. Numerous Polish sources corroborate Wojtek's involvement from their time in the Middle East. The British soldier's account of seeing a bear carrying crates of ammunition lends credence to the narrative. On the morning of May 26, 1998, Patricia Giron, a 45-year-old resident of Sioux City, Iowa, was slain in a home she had vacated 6 months prior. Her and her husband Gene had recently moved from across the road. They were in the process of selling remaining items from their former home, including a waterbed. According to reports, a man who had attended a previous yard sale at their former residence expressed interest in purchasing the waterbed. He allegedly made several calls to arrange a time to view the item. On that fateful Tuesday, Patricia went to meet this potential buyer at the old house, expecting to return shortly. Gene, from his vantage point in their new home, noticed a red car parked at the former residence during this time. When Patricia didn't return as anticipated, Gene went to check on her. He discovered a gruesome scene. The waterbed in the basement was covered in blood. Tragically, he found Patricia's lifeless body over an embankment outside the house. She had been stabbed so many times and with such force that the blade of the weapon broke. Evidence suggested that Patricia had been tied up with twine in the basement, but managed to free herself and attempt an escape before succumbing to her injuries. The Woodbury County Sheriff's Office, along with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, launched an investigation into Patricia's slaying. Given the personal nature of the attack, authorities believed that Patricia likely knew her assailant. Authorities also stated that they believed that there was no threat to public safety, which is generally interpreted to mean that an attack wasn't random, but targeted in some way. The red car observed by Gene became a focal point in the investigation, as it was seen at the residence around the time of the event, and is believed to be the perpetrator's vehicle. Despite these theories and leads, the case remained unsolved. Gene passed away on January 12, 2012, without seeing the case resolved. Personally, I can't shake the feeling that Gene's actions raise questions about his potential involvement. He was the one who noticed the red car from their new home, a sight that conveniently shifted blame to someone else. Notably, there's no indication that this distinctive red vehicle was seen by any other witnesses. Further, the police stated that there was no threat to public safety, which seems like a rather unusual statement given a woman was just slain while attempting to sell a waterbed to a stranger. If the authorities believed this version of events, would they really have stated that there was, quote, no threat to public safety? Also, the deeply personal nature of the slaying itself raises further questions that potentially indicate that her husband may have been the responsible party. That said, there's just not enough evidence one way or another to determine if he was involved. Like with all open investigations, we, the public, simply don't have access to all the investigative material that the authorities have. It could be that there's bankers' boxes of evidence sitting in Iowa somewhere, which contain evidence that supports Gene's narrative, but we just don't know. The Pacific Northwest is known for its dense forests, towering mountains, and a long history of strange creature sightings. Among the region's lesser-known cryptids is the Bat Squatch, a creature described as a bizarre mix of a bat and a primate. The origins of the Bat Squatch legend are tied to the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state on May 18, 1980. Following the catastrophic eruption, reports began to emerge of strange creatures seen in the area. The most famous early sighting occurred in 1994 when a man named Brian Canfield claimed to encounter a large winged humanoid while driving near Mount Rainier. According to Canfield, the creature stood about 9 feet tall, had glowing yellow eyes, bluish fur, and massive wings with a span of approximately 50 feet. Canfield described being frozen in terror as the beast stared at him before eventually flying away. This sighting gained significant attention in local media and among cryptid enthusiasts. Though no physical evidence was found to confirm Canfield's story, it laid the foundation for the Bat Squatch legend and inspired others to come forward with their own encounters. Over the years, additional sightings of creatures resembling Bat Squatch have been reported in various parts of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. One notable sighting took place in 2009 when hikers in Mount Shasta, California, described encountering a large winged creature that resembled a bat with primate-like features. Another report came from an anonymous pilot in 2011 who claimed to have seen a giant flying humanoid while flying near Mount Rainier. Some stories describe Bat Squatch as being capable of manipulating electronics, with witnesses reporting car engines stalling and radios malfunctioning during sightings. These details have led some to speculate that Bat Squatch could be more than a physical creature, possibly tied to supernatural or extraterrestrial phenomena. Skeptics argue that sightings of Bat Squatch are likely cases of misidentified animals, exaggerated stories, or outright hoaxes. Large birds, such as the great blue heron or turkey vulture, could be mistaken for winged humanoids, especially in low light or under stressful conditions. The Pacific Northwest is also home to owls with bright reflective eyes, which could contribute to reports of the Bat Squatch. And yes, for any long-time viewers of my channel, many skeptics believe that the Bat Squatch is indeed an owl misidentification. Skeptics also note that a primate-like being with wings would face significant biological challenges. They argue wings capable of supporting a 9-foot-tall creature would require an enormous amount of muscle, likely making such a creature too heavy to fly. Another theory suggests that Bat Squatch might be an evolved version of the Thunderbird, a legendary creature from indigenous folklore. Thunderbirds are often described as giant birds with supernatural powers, and some believe Bat Squatch could be a modern interpretation of this myth, adapted to fit contemporary lore. Still, believers in Bat Squatch point to the consistency of witness descriptions and the remote nature of many sightings as evidence that something unusual could be lurking in the wilderness. In November 1978, 5-day-old Raymond Green vanished from his Atlanta home in a brazen abduction that stunned his family and baffled investigators. Raymond was born on November 1, 1978, at Grady Memorial Hospital to 16-year-old Donna Green. While Donna watched her newborn through the nursery window, a woman named Lisa Morris approached her, claiming to be visiting a sister who had also given birth. Lisa, described as a black woman in her early 20s with light brown skin, a mole on her left cheek, and scars on her face, quickly ingratiated herself with Donna. She asked her a number of personal questions and visited her hospital room multiple times. When Donna and Raymond were discharged on November 3rd, Lisa requested a ride home. The driver first dropped Donna off at her apartment in southwest Atlanta, inadvertently revealing her address to Lisa. 3 days later, on November 6th, Lisa arrived uninvited at Donna's home. Donna, trusting the woman she'd met at the hospital, allowed her inside. After an hour, Donna left to shower, leaving Lisa with Raymond and Donna's brother Tony, who was also caring for his own infant son. When Donna returned, Lisa and Raymond were gone. According to sources, Tony had fallen asleep while taking care of his own child, leaving Lisa unattended with Raymond. A neighbor reported seeing Lisa carrying the baby into a brown vehicle driven by an unidentified man. Authorities later confirmed Lisa's identity was fabricated. No Lisa Morris, matching her description, existed in Atlanta, and her alleged sister at the hospital was a lie. The leading theory is that Raymond was abducted as part of an illegal adoption scheme. Investigators believe Lisa targeted Donna, a vulnerable teenage mother, with the intent to sell Raymond domestically or internationally. The meticulous planning, befriending Donna, learning her address, and executing the abduction suggests professional involvement. Notably, the Atlanta Police Department speculated Raymond may have been trafficked out of state, where adoption records could obscure his origins. Others speculate that Lisa was looking for a child to raise as her own, and that she targeted Donna because she believed the two of them looked fairly similar. Under this theory, given Raymond's age, she may have registered him as her own child by claiming she gave birth to him at home. If either of these theories are true, it's strongly believed that Raymond is still alive and is completely unaware of his true identity. Notably, this case faces some significant ongoing investigative challenges. Somehow, the Atlanta Police Department misplaced Raymond's original case file, forcing investigators to restart from scratch years later. It's unclear what evidence may have been lost from this initial case file. Further, no photographs of Raymond exist, only age-progressed sketches and the initial sketch of him as a baby. Similarly, the composite sketch of Lisa relies solely on Donna's memory. It's unclear to me why these sketches weren't verified with hospital staff. However, it's possible that no one remembered who Lisa was. After all, she wouldn't have had much reason to interact with hospital staff, and she likely would have just been assumed to be one of the numerous visitors who flood into maternity wards. Notably, Donna has continued to look for her son her entire life, and continues to do so at present. She believes the best chance of her case being solved will be him entering his DNA into a database voluntarily and finding out he gets a hit for a mom he never knew he had. Personally, I remain very optimistic that we're going to see this case solved in the coming years. All available evidence suggests that Raymond is almost certainly still alive. The well-orchestrated nature of the abduction, along with Lisa's apparent interest in the baby's background, points to a deliberate plan rather than a random crime. Further, there's other cases like this where individuals have stolen babies from teenage mothers under the disturbed idea that they're actually doing a favor for the child. Individuals who do this generally believe they're saving the child from a life of hardship, and thus would be unlikely to be the same sort of person who would dispatch the little one. Given that Raymond would now be in his mid-40s, it's entirely plausible that he has grown up unaware of his true identity. Moreover, similar cases have been resolved through DNA testing, often decades after the abduction took place. With modern genetic genealogy techniques and dedicated investigators, Donna Green's persistent hope of finding her son is far from unrealistic. Or maybe that's all wishful thinking on my part, not wanting to believe that someone would actually harm an innocent baby more than Lisa actually did. On October 8, 1976, 16-year-old Trenny Gibson vanished without a trace during a school field trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Trenny, a sophomore at Bearden High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, joined 38 classmates and horticulture teacher Wayne Dunlap for a field trip to the Smokies. The group planned to hike the Forney Ridge Trail to Andrews Bald, a grassy summit known for its panoramic views. The hike began around noon under chilly, rainy conditions. Trenny wore a blue blouse, striped sweater, jeans, and borrowed a plaid jacket from classmate Robert Simpson, who later reported she seemed uneasy about the trip. After reaching Andrews Bald, Trenny opted to return to the bus early while others lingered. Witnesses last saw her around 3 p.m. on a steep section of the trail near Klingman's Dome. One classmate recalled Trenny crouching to examine something off-trail before disappearing into dense undergrowth. By 3:40 p.m., her absence was noted, sparking immediate searches by classmates and park rangers. Despite deploying helicopters, scent dogs, and hundreds of volunteers, no physical evidence, not even a scrap of clothing, was ever found. The most plausible theory is that Trenny succumbed to the Smokies' harsh environment. The park spans over 800 square miles of rugged terrain, with dense forests, steep drop-offs, and unpredictable weather. On the day she vanished, temperatures hovered near 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and fog obscured visibility, complicating search efforts. Hypothermia or a fall could have claimed her life quickly, and the park's thick foliage might have concealed her remains. Notably, search dogs traced her scent to the Appalachian Trail and a roadside area, but storms washed away potential clues. Critics argue, however, that experienced searchers should have found some trace if she'd perished nearby, especially given the trail's popularity. Another theory suggests that she may have been abducted. This seems to me to be implausible, but not impossible. I note that there were at least 40 people around in the immediate vicinity, and as such I really have to question if a predator would have taken this opportunity to target Trenny. It just seems as though there were too many potential witnesses around for a predator to strike. That said, stranger things have happened. Others speculate that she may have succumbed to an animal attack. Black bears, coyotes, and bobcats inhabit the Smokies, and a fatal encounter is possible. However, park officials noted that attacks by these animals are extremely rare, and no blood or disturbed vegetation was found near Trenny's last location. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy reminding you to smash that like button and also subscribe. And yeah, you heard me, I said smash the like button just like a real YouTuber. Also, if you enjoy my consistent content output and want to keep supporting my work, please take a moment to share this video with 2 of your friends or family members. Nestled in the Tver region of western Russia lies Lake Brasno, a lake as rich in local lore as it is in water. Also, I have no idea what I was thinking when I wrote that line, and I thought about rewriting it as I was recording it, but it's too silly not to leave in. For centuries, tales have circulated about a formidable creature inhabiting its depths, a beast known as the Brasno dragon, or Brosnya in Russian. Described as a dragon-like entity, this cryptid has been the subject of numerous legends and eyewitness accounts, some dating back to the 13th century. One of the earliest and most notable legends tells of an encounter between the Brasno dragon and the Tatar-Mongol army in the 13th century. As the story goes, Batu Khan's forces paused at Lake Brasno to rest and allow their horses to drink. Suddenly, a massive creature emerged from the water, roaring fiercely and devouring both horses and soldiers. Terrified, the army retreated, and the city of Novgorod was spared from invasion. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, reports persisted of a giant creature surfacing in the evenings, only to submerge when approached. During World War II, locals even claimed that the beast swallowed a German airplane whole. Eyewitnesses have consistently described Brosnya as a serpentine figure, approximately 16 to 20 feet in length, with a fish-like or snake-like head and large eyes. Some accounts add that the creature possesses an enormous tail and iridescent scales, with a few even suggesting it emits a bioluminescent glow. In 1996, a group of tourists from Moscow reported seeing a dragon-like creature in the lake. Their 7-year-old son was the first to spot it, leading to an apparent photograph of the creature. And I say apparent photograph because despite sources mentioning that such a photograph exists, none of these sources actually include the picture itself. The following year, a news magazine organized an expedition to Lake Brasno to further investigate the creature. Participants included journalists and local officials who aimed to uncover the truth behind the legends. While they didn't encounter the creature firsthand, their investigations revealed that the lake's depth ranged between 120 to 160 feet. This was a new finding and revealed that the lake was much deeper than previously thought. This considerable depth, combined with the lake's ancient origins, led some to speculate that such a habitat could indeed harbor unknown phenomena. Skeptics have proposed various explanations for the Brasno dragon sightings. Some suggest that the creature might be a giant pike or a deformed beaver. And yes, you heard me right on that last part. Their suggestion is basically a giant mutant beaver, which seems like a hypothesis nearly as questionable as it being a dragon. Others hypothesize that natural phenomena could be responsible. For instance, hydrogen sulfide emissions from the lake's bottom might cause water to bubble, creating illusions reminiscent of a dragon's head. Alternatively, the presence of an underwater volcano could produce disturbances on the lake's surface, leading observers to interpret these as signs of a monstrous inhabitant. The combination of historical accounts, eyewitness testimonies, and the lake's mysterious characteristics continues to captivate the imagination of locals and cryptid enthusiasts alike. Dissociative fugue is a rare psychological phenomenon in which a person suddenly travels away from their usual surroundings with little or no recollection of their past life. Often, this condition appears alongside a profound sense of confusion or a feeling that the individual is disconnected from who they once were. In the late 19th century, psychiatrists and psychologists became increasingly interested in the various ways trauma or severe stress might cause the mind to fracture or split off experiences. One of the earliest documented cases that captured the public's attention was that of Ansel Bourne. In 1887, Ansel traveled from Rhode Island to Pennsylvania and opened a small shop under a different name, only to wake up one morning with no idea how he got there. His story was studied by pioneering psychologists, including William James, as evidence that a split in consciousness could occur under certain conditions. The term fugue comes from the Latin word for flight, reflecting how people experiencing this condition flee their usual circumstances. Early clinicians recognized that individuals in this state often embarked on unexpected journeys without understanding why. These travels were not ordinary trips or vacations. They were marked by confusion, amnesia for personal history, and the adoption of a new set of behaviors or an entirely new personality. Over time, interest in fugue states grew as more strange cases emerged, some lasting only hours, others persisting for weeks or longer. When the American Psychiatric Association first codified mental disorders in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, dissociative conditions were relatively small categories. In the DSM, published in 1952, and DSM-2, published in 1968, dissociative disorders were often lumped together with other, quote, hysterical conditions. By the time the DSM-3 came out in 1980, the diagnostic criteria had begun to evolve, and the term psychogenic fugue was recognized as a distinct entity. Later, the DSM-4 replaced the phrase psychogenic fugue with dissociative fugue, but still treated it as a standalone disorder. It wasn't until the DSM-5, published in 2013, that dissociative fugue became categorized as a specifier under the broader umbrella of dissociative amnesia, rather than a separate diagnosis. This shift reflected a deeper understanding that these fugue states are frequently intertwined with other dissociative symptoms, particularly difficulties in recalling autobiographical information. Thus, a person might be diagnosed with dissociative amnesia with dissociative fugue if their memory problems include sudden, unplanned travel away from home. But what causes these severe episodes? Dissociative fugues are often linked to severe stress, trauma, or intense emotional conflicts. People who develop fugues tend to have experienced major life stressors, such as personal loss, collapsing personal lives, war, or natural disasters. When the mind is pushed to its limit, it may attempt to protect itself by compartmentalizing painful experiences and fleeing entirely from the life in which the trauma occurred. Dissociative fugue, then, can be seen as an extreme coping mechanism, an unconscious effort to detach from an intolerable situation or memory. During a fugue state, an individual typically appears outwardly functional. They might hold down a new job, interact socially in unfamiliar settings, and carry on a seemingly normal routine, though it's often quite different from their usual lifestyle. The person may have no recollection of their past self, relationships, or personal history. Friends, family, and co-workers back home are left baffled as they discover that their loved one has vanished with no warning. The length of a fugue can vary drastically, from brief episodes that last just a few hours or days, to prolonged periods that span weeks, months, or even many years. Interestingly, many people who exit a fugue state experience a rather abrupt return to their original identity and memories. This can create a secondary wave of distress as they grapple with the idea that they lost time and possibly formed new relationships or engaged in activities they don't recognize. Notably, in some instances, people who have suffered from a dissociative fugue realize they preferred the lifestyle they were living during their fugue state and wish to return to it. In a number of these situations, individuals refuse to return back to their old lifestyle, leaving their friends and family shocked and disheartened. In the most extreme situations, the individual, having left the fugue state, chooses to adopt the identity they held during that period and continue living as that new person. Dissociative fugues are controversial by their very nature. One aspect of dissociative fugue that has drawn controversy is its rarity and apparent dramatic presentation. Some critics question whether it's overdiagnosed or even real in certain cases, suggesting that the striking nature of fugue states might lead to sensationalism. Over time, however, the clinical community has nearly universally accepted that dissociative disorders, while not fully understood, are both genuine and deeply distressing. While the controversy has largely been solved in the scientific community, the same can't be said for public perception. People who have undergone fugue states are often believed to be faking it by their loved ones, and in high-profile cases, by people on social media and in traditional media. Because fugues are so unusual, many people aren't aware that such a condition exists until they encounter a high-profile case, whether in the news or through a fictional portrayal. While the mechanisms that lead to fugue states still aren't understood, I suspect greater understanding of the brain will lead to many answers in the near future. On May 12, 1986, 26-year-old Wanda Jean Mays vanished from her aunt and uncle's home near Guntersville Lake in Alabama, leaving behind a scene of unexplained chaos. Wanda, a secretary at Redstone Arsenal, spent the evening of May 11, 1986, dining with her parents in Guntersville. Her father later recalled she seemed cheerful, but noted she had recently struggled with a chemical imbalance linked to extreme dieting, which caused sporadic panic attacks. Instead of returning to her apartment, Wanda opted to stay overnight at her aunt and uncle's lakeside home. She retired to the guest room around 10:30 p.m., a decision her family found unusual, as she rarely stayed there. At 5 a.m. the next morning, her aunt and uncle discovered her room locked. After forcing entry, they found the Venetian glass window shattered from the inside, blood smeared on the frame, and the bed untouched. Wanda's purse, identification, and jewelry remained on the nightstand, but her torn, blood-stained nightgown lay on the dock outside. A nearby canoe, also bloodied, floated empty on the lake. The official ruling concluded Wanda fled during an extreme panic attack. Her brother, John Mays, corroborated the severity of her symptoms and described her episodes as intense. Quote, "She would just be terrified of everything." Investigators theorized she broke the window to escape, used the canoe to cross the lake, and later fell from a 150-foot cliff 2 miles away, where her remains were found in 2003. The FBI's DNA lab confirmed the identity of the skeletal remains in 2008, closing the case as accidental. Initial suspicions of foul play arose from the blood evidence and reports of a woman resembling Wanda seen with rough-looking men a day after her disappearance. However, no corroborating evidence linked these sightings to her case, and the lack of overt signs of struggle supported the accidental death theory. While forensic science provided closure, questions about her final hours persist. Did a panic attack truly drive her to the cliff's edge, or did other forces play a role? While there's rampant speculation online questioning whether Wanda's case was really an accidental death, in my view, the evidence is fairly clear that it was. Notably, any oddities or supposedly unexplained evidence can be explained by the fact that Wanda wasn't acting rationally at the time of the accident. That said, predators target those with known weaknesses, and those going through mental health concerns are often particularly vulnerable to predation. I think this case is a good reminder that sometimes there can be a lot of mysterious factors at play, but at the end of the day, the conclusion can be the simplest one. Jessica Stacks, a 28-year-old woman from New Albany, Mississippi, vanished on New Year's Day in 2021 under circumstances that defy easy explanation. On the morning of January 1st, 2021, surveillance footage captured Jessica and her boyfriend, Jerry Wayne Baggett, at the West Union Quick Stop gas station. They were towing a small, motorless boat borrowed from a friend, Willie Stinson. Notably, Jessica left her phone with Stinson, claiming they would coordinate a pickup later, a decision that would complicate efforts to trace her movements. Baggett later told authorities the couple launched the boat into the rain-swollen Little Tallahatchie River near County Road 46. The river's current was dangerously fast due to recent storms, and the boat lacked oars or a motor. Baggett claimed they used a shovel to steer. According to his account, Jessica grew anxious as water flooded the vessel and asked to exit approximately 2 miles downstream. He alleged she began walking north through flooded fields toward Highway 30, but this version of events would later unravel under scrutiny. Baggett waited over 12 hours to report Jessica missing, notifying authorities at 10:15 p.m. that night. He claimed he retrieved the boat downstream, called for a ride, and only later realized Jessica was unaccounted for. The delay raised immediate red flags, particularly as search teams mobilized to scour the area. A massive operation ensued, involving helicopters, thermal drones, cadaver dogs, and over 30 members of the National Search and Rescue Association. Investigators recovered a single green rubber boot with the top cut off, matching Baggett's pre-search statement about Jessica modifying her footwear. They also found a coat, gloves, and footprints leading into a flooded farmer's field. A tree with chopped limbs and a 3-inch breaker fuse lodged in its crevice was documented, though its relevance remains unexplained. Despite weeks of searching, no body or conclusive evidence of foul play surfaced. The case took a darker turn as Baggett's story shifted over time. Initially, he insisted Jessica was with him on the boat. By 2023, however, he reversed his account, claiming he had not seen her that day and casting doubt on the entire premise of the boat trip, stating neither he nor Jessica could swim. Jessica's family vehemently disputes his narrative, arguing the excursion made little sense given the river's treacherous conditions and the couple's lack of boating experience. Critics, including Jessica's mother, have accused law enforcement of failing to adequately scrutinize Baggett. Theories about Jessica's fate range from accidental drowning to an intentional slaying. Personally, I think it's a really bad sign when a person of interest in a case has a constantly evolving story that can't be squared with previous iterations under any circumstances. As of 2025, the Union County Sheriff's Office maintains an open investigation, but acknowledges a lack of evidence to pursue charges. Brianna Alexandra Maitland, a 17-year-old from Montgomery, Vermont, vanished on March 19, 2004, after finishing her shift as a dishwasher at the Black Lantern Inn. Last seen driving her green Oldsmobile, Brianna never reached the friend's home where she was supposed to be staying that night. The next day, her car was discovered backed into the side of an abandoned farmhouse, known locally as the Old Dutchburn House, approximately 1 mile from the restaurant. The vehicle's rear end was lodged into the structure with personal items, including her uncashed paychecks, wallet, and contact lenses, left inside. The driver's door was open, and scattered belongings suggested a struggle or hurried exit. Brianna's disappearance was not immediately treated as suspicious. Law enforcement initially assumed the car had been abandoned by a drunk driver and towed it without a thorough forensic examination. It wasn't until days later, after her family reported her missing, that the connection to the abandoned vehicle was made. This delay hindered early investigative efforts, as potential evidence may have been lost or contaminated. Notably, even once she was reported missing, and the connection to the car was made apparent, the Vermont State Police considered Maitland as a likely runaway and were skeptical of foul play. Brianna's parents, Bruce and Kelly Maitland, emphasized that her behavior in the days leading up to her disappearance was unremarkable. She had celebrated passing her GED exam with her mother hours before vanishing, discussing plans for college and a weekend trip. Multiple theories have been explored in relation to her case. Weeks before her disappearance, she attended a party where she was violently assaulted by a former friend, leaving her with a concussion. While charges were filed, the case was dropped after she vanished. Rumors swirled about her potential entanglement with local substance dealers, including Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson, whose home was raided in 2004. An anonymous affidavit alleged Brianna was slain over a substance debt and disposed of on a pig farm. And yeah, the details are really gruesome, so I'm going to let you use your imagination on that one. Notably, Vermont's proximity to Canada fueled speculation she was trafficked, though no evidence supports this. In 2022, Vermont State Police identified a DNA sample collected near Brianna's car using advanced genetic genealogy. The DNA matched one of 11 persons of interest interviewed over the years, but investigators lacked sufficient evidence to name a suspect or make an arrest. On the 20th anniversary of her disappearance in 2024, the FBI announced a $40,000 reward for information leading to Brianna's recovery. The offering of this reward 20 years later has led to speculation that the FBI knows that someone not directly involved in her disappearance knows who did it. The Vermont State Police have reiterated that the investigation remains active, with weekly tips still arriving, though many rehash old leads. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here with a reminder to hit that notification bell and share this video on social media and with your friends and family. It's because people like you share my videos that I've been able to substantially increase the amount of time I spend working on my channel. On January 25, 2025, the quiet Dutch city of Assen became the epicenter of one of the most audacious art heists in recent history. And yes, I'm always a bit wary of covering current events, but any longtime viewers know that art heists are one of my personal interests. So here we are, hot off the presses, an absolutely off-the-wall art heist mystery involving explosives. Thieves targeted the Drents Museum, using explosives to blast their way into the building and steal 4 irreplaceable artifacts from Romania's Dacian civilization. Valued at €6 million, the stolen items, including a 2,500-year-old gold helmet, represent not just a financial loss, but a devastating blow to Romania's cultural identity. The thieves specifically targeted the Dacia Empire of Gold and Silver exhibition, a loaned collection from Romania's National History Museum in Bucharest. Among the stolen items were 3 gold bracelets and the helmet of Cotofanesti, all dating to the 5th century BC. The helmet, weighing 2.2 pounds of solid gold, is a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship. Its intricate designs, featuring mythical creatures, sacrificial scenes, and large eyes meant to ward off evil, reflect a blend of Greek, Eurasian, and Thracian influences. Discovered in 1927 by children playing in a Romanian village, the helmet was initially used as a water bowl for livestock before its historical significance was recognized. The 3 spiral bracelets, meanwhile, originated from sacrificial pits in the ancient Dacian capital. Likely never worn for any significant period of time, these objects were likely offerings to deities, showcasing the Dacians' advanced metallurgical skills. At 3:45 a.m. on January 25th, an explosion shattered the silence near the Drents Museum. CCTV footage captured 3 hooded figures using a crowbar and explosives to breach a side door, triggering a flash of light and smoke that obscured the cameras. Once inside, the thieves smashed display cases and fled within minutes, leaving behind a sledgehammer later found in a nearby ditch. The museum's lack of nighttime security guards, a cost-saving measure, allowed the thieves to operate unimpeded. Their escape route involved a stolen gray Volkswagen Golf, which was found burning on a road 4 miles from the museum. Police believe the perpetrators switched vehicles to evade detection, possibly fleeing toward Germany. Dutch authorities, working with Interpol, believe that the suspects may be from North Holland and trace their movements via CCTV and license plate tracking. A team of 35 officers, including forensic experts and art crime specialists, pursued leads across multiple Dutch cities and considered links to Romanian criminal networks. There's several theories that have been put forth thus far. The most common is that they're simply professional art thieves attempting a high-value score at a poorly secured museum. The proper usage of explosives as well as the operational security measures taken suggest professionals rather than a group of amateurs. Romanian officials speculated the artifacts might be held for ransom or used as bargaining chips in illicit deals. They've publicly speculated that the thieves may threaten to melt the gold items down if their demands aren't granted. This would of course net the thieves well over 2 pounds of untraceable gold. However, the gold itself is only worth about $50,000 versus the priceless nature of the items in their present state. Others have suggested it's a political statement, a full frontal assault on Romanian culture, so to speak. Notably, Romanian authorities are facing significant criticism for letting some of their most prized cultural heritage be sent to a museum with basically no security. Alien hand syndrome is a rare neurological condition in which a person's hand seems to act on its own, performing movements that are independent of the person's conscious intentions. Individuals with AHS often describe feeling as though their hand has developed its own mind, grabbing objects, interfering with tasks, or moving in ways disruptive to their daily life. Because of the striking nature of these symptoms, the syndrome has fascinated both doctors and the general public. However, for people living with the syndrome, it can be distressing and challenging to manage. Historically, the condition we now call alien hand syndrome was first described in medical literature in the early 20th century. A German neurologist, Dr. Kurt Goldstein, detailed a case in 1908 involving a patient whose left hand seemed to act involuntarily. Later, more cases emerged and different subtypes were recognized. Initially, some physicians were skeptical about the nature of these symptoms, and the phenomenon wasn't well documented because of how rare it is. Over time, with better neuroimaging techniques and an improved understanding of brain function, researchers began to confirm that AHS results from specific neurological disruptions. The root cause of alien hand syndrome is damage or disconnection in certain areas of the brain that control voluntary movement. Most commonly, AHS has been seen in individuals who've had brain surgery to treat severe epilepsy. In other cases, strokes, tumors, or infections can harm the regions responsible for integrating sensory and motor signals, leading to the involuntary hand movements characteristic of AHS. There are a few different subtypes of AHS that neurologists often discuss. However, the most frequently identified type is the callosal variety, which is linked to damage in the corpus callosum and usually involves the non-dominant hand. Individuals with AHS often face difficulties carrying out routine tasks. Even something as simple as getting dressed can be a pain because their alien hand might undo their actions or behave contrary to what they intend. Some patients report that their rogue hand might grab onto door frames as they walk by, or even try to interfere with the healthy hand during tasks like eating or writing. Understandably, these symptoms can lead to confusion, frustration, and embarrassment, especially in social settings. The unpredictable nature of the hand's movements can cause anxiety, as sufferers never know when or how their hand might act up. The Groot slang is a cryptid originating from South African folklore. Its name, which translates to great snake in Afrikaans, provides a clue to its terrifying reputation as a colossal serpent-like creature said to inhabit the caves and rivers of South Africa. According to legend, when the world was created, the gods made a mistake. They designed a powerful creature with the intelligence of a human and the strength and physical form of a massive serpent. Recognizing the danger this creature posed, they split it into two species, snakes and elephants. However, one original Groot slang managed to escape and took refuge in the Richtersveld, a rugged desert region in South Africa. The Richtersveld, where the creature is said to reside, is home to deep caves and unexplored caverns, such as the legendary Wonder Hole or Bottomless Pit. And yeah, I'm not going to make any jokes here or insert any extra commentary, but I'll repeat where it's said to live: the Wonder Hole or the Bottomless Pit. According to folklore, this enormous cave leads to an underground lake filled with diamonds, guarded fiercely by the Groot slang. Also, I can't be the only one that thinks this sounds exactly like the lore of an optional side boss in a Final Fantasy game. Descriptions of the Groot slang vary, but most accounts agree that it's a massive serpent, sometimes depicted with elements of an elephant, such as tusks or a trunk. It's often said to be anywhere from 40 to 50 feet long, though some tales describe it as even larger, emphasizing its intimidating size and strength. Most reports claim the Groot slang is amphibious, capable of moving with ease through water and on land. One notable account comes from the early 20th century, when European prospectors and explorers ventured into South Africa during the Diamond Rush. Reports of a giant snake guarding diamond mines began to surface, often dismissed as exaggerated tales or warnings to keep outsiders away from sacred or valuable lands. A particularly intriguing account came from an English businessman, Peter Grayson, who disappeared in 1917 while exploring the Richtersveld in search of diamonds. Grayson's party was reportedly attacked, with survivors claiming he was eliminated by a massive serpent, lending further fuel to the Groot slang legend. While skeptics argue that such accounts could easily be explained by natural dangers, like wildlife or harsh conditions, believers see them as evidence of the cryptid's existence. The scientific community largely dismisses the Groot slang as a myth, citing the lack of physical evidence. Further, skeptics point out that giant snakes flopping around in wonder holes sounds like something out of someone's fantasy rather than a scientific account. In modern times, the Groot slang has become something of a deep cut among cryptozoologists. Expeditions to the Richtersveld continue, driven by curiosity and the hope of discovering something extraordinary. Despite the lack of any hard evidence, the Groot slang myth continues to persist. The story of Apache, a reputed female Vietnamese sniper during the Vietnam War, has become one of the Vietnam War's greatest historical mysteries. She's often cited in connection with the legendary U.S. Marine sniper Carlos Hathcock, who claimed to have encountered and ultimately eliminated her. Yet, much debate surrounds whether she was a historical individual or a composite character. While there's widespread anecdotal evidence in Western sources, especially among American veterans, the lack of verifiable Vietnamese records has led some to question her existence. The most cited sources for the Apache story comes from accounts of Carlos Hathcock, who is credited with 93 confirmed slayings during the Vietnam War. Hathcock alleged that Apache was a skilled Viet Cong sniper known for her brutality, including the torture of captured Marines. According to his recollection, this female fighter earned the nickname Apache because of her penchant for cruelly ending American prisoners. Critics point out that first-hand documentation of Apache's existence remains elusive outside of oral testimony and veteran anecdotes. If she really had been a high-profile Viet Cong sniper, there might have been at least some formal records from the North Vietnamese. Historians have noted that the People's Army of Vietnam tended to keep fairly detailed records, including information about decorated snipers and specialized units. However, the Viet Cong, while fighting under the direction of North Vietnam, wasn't officially part of the People's Army of Vietnam. Further, the Viet Cong was composed of regular units, which may have had better record keeping, and guerrilla units, which almost certainly didn't. Skeptics argue that if she were as infamous as described, there should be at least some trace in Vietnamese archives. Further, they argue that if she had existed, she would have been lauded by the North Vietnamese for propaganda purposes. On the other hand, defenders of the historical Apache theory point to the nature of guerrilla warfare. The Viet Cong operated in covert cells, with fighters often using pseudonyms to hide their identities from both the enemy and even their allies, if operational security demanded it. Under such conditions, it's plausible that a female sniper could have operated without leaving an extensive paper trail. Moreover, the massive destruction and confusion that accompanied the Vietnam War might mean that some documentation, if it ever existed, was destroyed or lost. This argument suggests that the absence of evidence is not definitive proof of her non-existence. Also, according to the official narrative, she was a figure deeply feared by the Americans that was slain in action. Any acknowledgement of this would have had the potential to damage North Vietnamese and Viet Cong morale. Beyond the question of official documentation, some argue that cultural and political motives could also explain why Vietnamese records remain silent about an infamous female sniper. In post war Vietnam, narratives about female fighters often highlighted revolutionary heroism and sacrifice. It's true that women played significant roles, both overt and covert, in the war. However, the story of a female fighter who engaged in torturous behavior might not align with the idealized depiction of female revolutionaries in official account. Hence, it's possible that even if a female sniper committed such acts, her story wouldn't be included in state-sanctioned narratives that emphasize moral righteousness and heroic conduct. There's also the perspective that Apache might have been a symbolic figure, or even an amalgamation of multiple female snipers. Some veterans have suggested that stories about Apache circulated as a means of personifying the fear and anger many Marines felt when confronted with a savage battlefield. War, with its countless rumors and secondhand stories, can inflate real events into powerful legends. It's not uncommon for a single, tangible enemy combatant to become a boogeyman figure, someone who encapsulates the worst fears and horrors of conflict. The psychological impact of facing an adversary reputed to be exceptionally cruel could have enhanced her legend over time. Meanwhile, those who served with Carlos Hathcock remained steadfast that Apache was, in fact, a real person. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, Hathcock became determined to take her out after witnessing the brutal torture she inflicted on captive Marines. In the well-known telling, he successfully eliminated her at a distance of over 700 yards, ending her reign of terror. Further, and importantly, his spotter verified the reality of the event itself, though couldn't directly verify who the woman was. While this anecdote relies heavily on personal testimonies, supporters say the consistency of these accounts lends credibility to the story. Still, from a strictly historical standpoint, anecdotal evidence alone can't serve as conclusive proof. Oral testimonies are subject to memory lapses, exaggerations, and the influence of retelling across decades. Further, Carlos Hathcock is a near-mythic figure in his own right, and people like this do have the tendency to have a reality-altering aura surrounding them. The mystery of Apache boils down to a clash between the fog of war and the rigid demands of historical proof. On one hand, the anecdotal evidence, especially from Carlos Hathcock and various Marine veterans, suggests she was a real, fearsome female Viet Cong sniper. On the other, a lack of verifiable documentation raises legitimate doubts, and it's no secret that war stories can morph into legend over time. Given what we know, there's enough credibility in those first-hand accounts to keep her story alive. Whether Apache was one woman or an amalgamation of multiple female fighters, one thing's clear: the allure of her legend captures the raw and brutal nature of the Vietnam War.